Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. First, I would like to thank the curators of the Fabric of Felicity for inviting me to take part in this fantastic exhibition that I really enjoy. Even though I'm in it, I really enjoy it. I think it's a great exhibition. And I also would like to thank the whole team at Garage for their fantastic work. I never worked with such an amazing team. And also I want to invite a big thank you for Anna to invite me to this, to hold a lecture, but also to be able to hold a workshop during these days, these Saturday and Sunday. I really look forward to this. I'm very excited. So I'm an artist working in Stockholm, Sweden. And I work with sculpture, installation, and interactive things, you could say, or digital things. And I'm also a professor and educator at Konstfack, University for Design and Art in Stockholm, Sweden. Okay, so today I will try to look at the work that I made especially for the exhibition and try to pull out some threads from this by also using other work that I've done previously, but working in a little bit the same realm or a little bit the same universe. And when I first met Valentin Diakonov, he came to Stockholm, and I thought that he wanted to talk to me because I had curated an exhibition called Textile Subtexts that was looking at not so much textile art, but looking at how textile has influenced art in different ways, and how textile like knowledge and textile consciousness have influenced art and artists. So I just curated that together with Helena Selder at Marabouparken in Stockholm, Sweden, and also in Malmö Konstmuseum. But it wasn't because of that curatorial venture that I, as an artist, went into, but it was because of the art that I had made. So I was very happy to be invited in this capacity. Okay, if I speak too fast, just hold up your hand, because sometimes I get into a groove and then I lose myself. So please, and also I also really like to be interrupted, so I don't mind to have questions along the way whenever you feel like asking something or you have something that you would like to contribute with. This is more than welcome. Okay, so for this exhibition, when I first met Valentin, we talked, there was some of the points of my work that I've tried to talk to him about, and one thing that I've had very much on my mind was how repeated patterns wants to cover everything. If you have a pattern that is a repetition, it wants to cover everything. That's quite philosophical in a way, that you have this embedded like a, or maybe not philosophical is the word, but it's like a logarithm. It just wants to go by its, just cover everything. So I was thinking a lot about that in relationship to how ideas travel in between people, and how you how things can be embedded into patterns, sometimes like in a very secretive way and sometimes in a very obvious way. So I was very interested in that, and Valentin sent me a lot of things to read, and I got very interested in the city of Ivanovo that I knew about a little bit before, but maybe not to that extent. And it was very exciting to read about the whole the Russian counterpart, or like the Russian Manchester. So sometimes it's also, you see things in a Russian Soviet way, and then things that happened here that were linked to politics also happened in Sweden, but they were linked to politics in a different way, and also in the United States and in France. So I was very interested in this relationship between these different things. But then we decided to go to Ivanovo. So the three curators of the Fabric of Felicity and myself, we went to Ivanovo. And it was very exciting. It was my first time in Russia, so I was very excited about that. And I was also very excited to be able to actually go to the site and not only read about things that you normally do. So, yes. So the reason kind of why we went there was this Museum of Ivanovo Chintz. And their publication, 100% Ivanovo, that is an amazing publication. And it's, I think that I bought one of the last copies maybe for the Library of Konstfack in Stockholm. And they have really gone through their archive. And not only the prints, but also the people that worked with the prints, the designers and the workers of the factories, and the stories. So they were also very generous and showed me the collection and showed me the different things behind the scenes. So this experience, together with going to a factory that is actually operational at the moment, really formed the foundation of my starting point for the piece. And this is also one of the older factories. It's outside of Ivanovo. And what you see to the right is maybe how patterns look these days. They're designed in a digital way, and they are usually for bedspreads and these kind of different things. And to the left, you see the design department in the factory. And first, the design department just talked about the different prints they did. And then I asked them about the relationship to historical prints and if they've seen the prints of the factory previous. And then they started to take things out from the cupboards. And they have an amazing collection of patterns and prints. That was very exciting to see. So I think that the future might look different if these designers could take over. I think that the department that is maybe just making the most decisions now is the people that are selling the prints. And I think the designers are very excited about their history and want to go deeper into exploring that in relationship to contemporary life. So these things really form the foundation of what happened to me afterwards. So then I went back to Sweden and I was processing this material and reading more and thinking about constructivism and what happened in the beginning of the Soviet project, or how you say, and how artists and designers they embraced the new world and thought about how the new world will be dressed and what will happen. So the prints started to take over my world, and I really wanted to work with them digitally because I felt that the fabric and how it travels together with the digital surface for me is it's like how I see the different principles of using fabric and print to drape things and to kind of wrap things around, and I really could feel this textile principles. So I thought I very easily could just digitalize all of the prints from Ivanovo. But what I didn't really realize that most of the prints are done on rolls, like they're etched, like rolls of copper that were etched. So the report travels like elastically. It's not like when you screen print, it's like 1, 2, do. It's easy to find the report. But when it just flows over the surface. So this became an immense work for me to do it. But now I have these patterns digital, so I can use them and as a kind of as fabric in a way. So what I did was that I both wrapped them around 3D models of objects that I felt contained ideas of memory, of mapping, of shipping, of wrapping, of printing, of cargo planes, and the Billy bookshelf as an IKEA product that have tried also to go all over the world. So this is how I used it, and I wanted them to be on pedestals to enhance the double nature of how fabric works. That the fabric is both just an image, but it's also something that you use. So it's like always has this double thing. It's always the podium and the sculpture. It's like the podium and the content both in one. So I wanted to enhance this fact. So this was one of the fabrics that I made as a fabric by the meter. And fabric by the meter is really, I think it's a very interesting concept to think about, how it's like a readily designed object that one designer has done, like fabric on the meter, and then just give away. And then it's a collaboration with someone else that picks it up and make it into something. And it's also something that is 2D, and it knows it's going to be 3D someday. It's going to be clothes, it's going to be a pillow, it's going to be something. So I really wanted to use this like fabric by the meter, and also to think about how the fabric and the screen of the smartphone or of another kind of device, like a tablet, work together. It's just two flat screens, but I'm interested in making sculpture out of these. So this was one of the prints that's called All Repeated Patterns Wants to Cover the Whole Wide World, Utopian Movements Dressed in Overalls. And I think I've been thinking about overalls for a long time. I realized when I went through my old work that it's something that comes back, and I wonder, there's so many different, these are the overalls. So the fabric is just, by using a zero waste pattern, it's just an incision. So you just make an incision along here and along there, and then you just fold it, and then it becomes the overall. So it's a no waste, and then you just sew it in the shoulders, and voila, you have an overall. So these are the overalls when they're hanging in the closet, and I wanted people to be able to take them out, and I'm not sure if someone has or if someone will. We'll see what happens with them. So I was very, in a way, inspired by looking at both futurists and constructivists have all made overalls, and this is the tuta that is also in the exhibition, the Fabric of Felicity. So I think that if you've seen the exhibition, you've seen this work too. And the tuta was made by Ernesto Micheles, or Thayat, that he was calling himself as a designer and artist of the futurist movement. And here you also see this is a different take on the zero waste. So this is also you cut it here, and then you fold the legs, so the legs are sewn together here, and then you have the shoulders here, and then the arms go out here and here. So it's also kind of a one-piece zero waste fabric. And I think this is an interesting way of thinking about the 2D, 3D. If you're not a super, you don't have to be super skilled. And this was also, I think this was the first time that someone actually published it in a magazine, the pattern, how to make the tuta. So it was published for the people, everyone should be able to make this. And I thought this is a very interesting concept also of sharing ideas, but also wanting everyone to be dressed in this. Men actually did a special one also for women, but I chose to just ignore that. And of course, Stepanova, it's fantastic. And this is Harriet Quimbley Er, the first American woman aeroplane person. I think there's also something about how the overall makes you feel like someone that is doing something and not just to be looked at. And she made one for herself in purple silk. And it's also, of course, I'm brought up in the 70s, and there was a great unisex movement, and Sweden was very much men and women were all the same. And I think I only knew that I was a woman in my 20s. I was kind of in this 70s project, and still probably am. And of course, early idols of mine also wore overalls. So that's it. It's all the. And this was an early piece I made, 2000. It was a piece called Come On Clothes in English, and it was 20 pants and 20 sweaters that were interlinked, and they could be used by the people in the exhibitions. So they traveled into Turkey, and they were that's the only time I had a piece stolen, was the inauguration of the new Modern Museum in Stockholm, when they were used, and someone walked off with them. But they were cheeky, and it's a kind of interesting way to make sculpture. And we also made for Dazed and Confused magazine. I made with a circus school in Stockholm, that's a circus artist, and we built human pyramids. But we only took the photographs when they fell down and failed, but they were quite great. So the other pattern by the meter that I made for the exhibition is called All Patterns Wants to Cover the Whole Wild World, and its scarves carry the message. And I think that in every both political, but also, of course, other kinds of movements, the scarf becomes something that you use to show that you're part of something, but also to signal what you want. If it could be sexual things, or it could be that you want to feel a bond with other people. I think there's something about tying it, or in the action of actually dressing yourself in it, that confirms that you're in it. I'm doing this, I'm in it. So I really wanted to make a scarf that was also fabric that could also be cut up into scarves. And of course, also for me, as looking at Russia from outside, being brought up with not so many Russians, but a lot of Polish, and my father's from Czechoslovakia, there's also like an image of the babushka, or like the scarf, as a female thing in one way, and also the rose as a Russian thing. And so for me, that's a very romantic notion. And together with this kind of sexual political layer, I was interested in this, but also thinking about how the artists, this is maybe something I'm not so sure about, but I'm thinking a lot about how the constructivists tried to see the object as a kind of comrade, as opposed to the capitalist object, to see it as something that was like utilitarian and that you collaborated with. And I think that these notions, especially now, it's interesting to try to think about these things, and to think about if everyone wants to gamble, but if you would take that kind of energy and turn it into something less destructive, how would this affect politics today, for example? So this is the scarf fabric. So I used similar images, but I wanted to create this like this feeling of perspective, or of never-ending patterns in them. And I think that one thing that I, of course, perhaps was aware of, but become more aware of after doing this piece, is how the central perspective is such a Western construction. And I think that that's just something that surfaced a lot in my mind since I made this piece. But I really, really liked working with the fabrics in this way, so that you could also use them to decorate the cafe in garage, or you could use them in all kinds of different ways. And that's also enforcing looking at an image as a pretty image, and just having it as a nice scarf or something that you just wear. So these are the works that are in the exhibition, and if you would like to, I would like to end the presentation with us maybe going, and I can show you the work in situ rather than just sitting here. We can see what happens. Okay, so then it's also, of course, this was a scarf that's also in the one on the right. It's also in the exhibition in Ivanovo, with all the other objects, and also the one on the left. So these were also inspiring to me to think about. This is early propaganda scarves, and what does it mean in this way? And I can say that if you look at, for example, in this one, if you look at the one up on this fabric up here, which says, this is actually in real life very small pattern, and in the small petals of the flowers it says "People of the world unite," but it's almost so small so you can't really read it. I think that was the first time when I was in a museum that I realized that I need to get glasses, because I was like, I can't see any text. Where's the text? And then I was like, oh God, it's so small. And then it's also something very contradictory. Why would you want to hide propaganda? Like, to hide propaganda is like a kind of bit of an interesting thing. But also the relationship between flowers and propaganda, that even though these fabrics had to, they were holding propaganda and being used as propaganda, they also had to be attractive to everyone. So it's always a negotiation between the kind of floral patterns and the propaganda. So this, I also found this in between, since I'm also very interested in the relationship between modernism and folklore, which I think is a relationship that is kind of cut off, but it's actually very present when you look at it. But in these fabrics, I could see this link very clearly. So, and this is the third part, you can say, of the piece that I made for the Fabric of Felicity, and this is the use that you can use the app to cover flat surfaces. So if you download the app Bella Rune, you can just hold it still and let it look at the flat surface, and it will start spreading the patterns from Ivanovo out on the floor. And you can also plant roses. And that's because of the famous revolution that were in the States, actually. But that branded the saying, we want bread and roses. And I always think about that as something very good to think about in this world, that we don't only need bread, we also need roses. And I think that art in many ways provide these roses. So this is the third part of it. And now I'm going to try to talk about the first ventures out in using augmented reality, and to try to make the smartphone into a poetic tool that I really needed to do. And I think that if you're an art maker, the ever-present smartphones in every exhibition, everywhere you go, is something that's sometimes quite disruptive. And I see museums as being like everyone is just taking loads of photos and just looking at photos, and even selfies. So none of my apps you can use for selfies. I know a 16-year-old friend of mine said to me, but Bella, selfies are great because I control my own image, but they still bore me. She's so right, but it still really bores me. And I think that what I wanted to try to see if I could almost hijack okay, if you want to look at your phone, I will make the art in the fucking phone so that you can't escape it. So I had been thinking about how can you do this? But you can have tours, you can do different things. But then I was invited to do. A curator phoned me and said, "Do you want to do a solo show in the forest in Sweden in August, September, October, November?" And Sweden is a little bit like Moscow, and even colder maybe sometimes in the summer. So to make an exhibition outdoors from the end of August is insane in one way. But I said yes, because I like to say yes to things. And then I thought, because I think a lot about what does this device do to me? How has this changed the way I act? How has it changed the way I see private and public? Like, what is this interface doing to me? And that I'm constantly working in one way, or am I constantly playing? I don't know anymore this, and I think I'm not alone in this feeling. So when I was invited to do something in a forest, I didn't want to do something about nature or about forest, but maybe about work and play. And this is for me, like, the forest is very much like, yes, I'm having a day off, let's take a walk in the forest. It symbolizes these kind of things. So that's how I wanted to work with it. So then I thought, you can't compete with nature. It's always like, if you're outdoors, nature is always like more fantastic, with trees and everything. So I thought about fridge magnets that you have like on the fridge. They just stuck there. So this is a principle that I wanted to work with. And then I didn't really know how to work with augmented reality at all at that time. So I had met a young guy and had an interesting conversation with him. So I thought, I phoned him up and asked him if it's possible for him to think about a way of doing this. And he said, I have no idea. Let me call you back in 20 minutes. So then he went, I guess, talked to someone or Googled or whatever he did. But then he said, let's do it. So we didn't know how to do it. But we decided then in 2015 to create an app that you were going to be able to use in the forest, and you were going to be able to use augmented reality. And first I thought I would have to work with stupid QR codes or something like that to trigger things. And when I discovered that I could work with, this is like, I just think it's so great. You don't have to document anything yourself. You can just like Google it, and it has a presence in this way. We made the app so that you could walk around the forest and look at these images that would trigger different sculptures or 3D sculptures. And at that time, we also actually made a tail that you could wear. Like the invitation card for the exhibition was a tail. So if you wore it, it would feel, when you move, the digital tail would kind of move with you. So this was the forest pieces. And then so they are just, I used a lot of images that had to do with work for me, like desktop images, like paintings or self-portraits or something else that would signal the everyday life for an artist. And then I used 3D models of decorative objects like pillows, pillars, pedestals, curtains, everything that is never is looked on as constructive, but it's like there for decoration. And these 3D models, I again like textile draped with these images, so that they became, and then they would trigger different things like this urn with the desktop pattern would trigger a rain, and then they all were animations and they all used sound. It was great. I thought that was like going to be like the children was already so embedded in this through Lego and through different things, but they were all very excited. But also old people were possibly more excited to use this. And maybe it wasn't really you can have high-tech magic that is like, and this is so low-tech in one way, and so it's nothing. But I think that also adds to the magic and the relationship between the physicality and what happens. So this is how it looked in the forest. So if you would have the app, you could actually see it now. Yes?
Just a quick question.
Yes.
How do you see a future of integration of technologies,
Yeah.
specifically smartphones?
Yes.
Let's say,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
textual art?
Yeah. No, and I always, I'm never really interested in immersive experience. I'm more interested in keeping the kind of friction and the still of the physicality of how we move around and how we do things together. That's also, I think, to try to, I think it will be more and more less and less objects. And it will.
It looks like one or the other. Like
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also, I think what the drive for a lot of tech companies. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I think the drive for a lot of tech companies is to make the immersive, because that's also the most addictive in many ways. So I think that this is the way, and I think it will continue like that, but then I think it will backlash, and we will see something. I think that the world will change a lot, maybe even during my lifetime, but I think it will change a lot into, in many ways, it will become more low res and low tech, and in many. Yeah, it could be either or. Yeah. Yeah, maybe. But I think, because I think that in some ways that when I went to Chelsea College of Art, in my fine art, it was the research was on virtual reality and art. And I remember in '98, someone 3D printed a small tree. And I thought, okay, now we're all going to just 3D print all the sculptures. And you're like, wait, what? And I think, and I went to the first like virtual reality cave in the late '90s in the Polytechnics in Stockholm. And I mean, I had a really good experience when I was in New York. I went to a friend of mine that works with virtual reality in Norway told me about an exhibition, or not an exhibition actually, but an experience that was at Madame Tussauds in New York. I didn't even know there was a Madame Tussauds, and it was what's it called? Ghostbuster Experience. And I thought, this is horrible. And then it was super immersive. It was like you had a vest and you had like, you saw your friends as avatars. You were just like in it. And I thought, thank God this didn't exist when I was a teenager. I would have just disappeared into some kind of no man's land where it's all just like it triggers everything inside you and fear and everything in a very safe way. So it's an exciting thing. And at the same time, I don't know, there's something about immersiveness and about like, I like the friction of stuff. I like the friction of other people. I like the messiness and the things that go wrong. And in the digital realm, there's no smell, there's no weight, there's no age. And I like smell and weight and age. So I think when they start to, maybe that's the way it will go, that it will start to become more. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, but it's always like the kind of the pull, I think. So I think it's a really interesting question to think about, and also the kind of gamification. We were now working on another project where I met quite young kids. They go in the 4th grade, and I could feel like when I talk to the kids, like one of them, like they can't focus, and then you ask them, but what do you want to do? If you don't want to do this, what do you want to do? And they all had different games that they just wanted to go back to. So they were like addicts completely. And I think that that has happened to me too at some points in my life. So I think it's a very strong, it's a strong addiction in this way. But it's interesting to play with this kind of attractiveness and then to create some kind of friction. I think it's. I'm not like a technophobe, and I'm not also like a complete like hallelujah. I think somewhere like I think also like every time I do these exhibitions, there's always a person, usually a man, that says to me, but you can have these Google glasses and you can just like da. But I'm like, but for me, it's also about like this phone where I send text to my lover, where I send a stupid mail to the company, or like, yeah, I do everything in this. So I wanted to be in this, and that's the important part, not the illusion. It's like this is it's mine, private, and it's like super open, and then this relationship. And I think this is for me what's interesting, why it's interesting to work with. And yeah. But I actually just proposed something, but I don't think they want to do it because I will tell you about it afterwards maybe, because so this was in the forest, and you see it's very kind of very, I don't know, fridge magnet style. But then I was asked, I thought that this was going to be a one-off with this kind of technique, but then I was asked by the museum up north in Sweden if I wanted to do a traveling exhibition up north. And in the north of Sweden, there's not a lot of konsthalle or museums where you can exhibit art. Now they're actually going to get a new museum to this organization that's going to be huge, and things are probably going to change, but there hasn't been so much. So they do touring exhibitions, and they asked me if I wanted to do it and if I had some idea about, because they've been touring like in churches and different things. So I thought about it a bit, and after the experience in the forest, and I had so many interesting meetings in the forest with children and adults, but I thought I want to be where people go in the north of Sweden, and they go to sports centers. So I did a touring exhibition of sports centers where I thought a lot about what is contemporary textiles that we don't think about, and what is touring, what is popping up. And I thought a lot about this culture of pop-up, like mobile phone companies have a pop-up store all of a sudden. They want to sell something to you. They give you a bag. They, all this, like it's a constant architecture that we don't think about so much. It's like they're completely all the time. And I don't think they ask for permission. It's just something that's a constant flow. So I did an exhibition constructed of 5 carpets and 5 this kind of pull-up displays, and also giveaway. There was giveaway bags and giveaway hats, and you could also bring your T-shirts in to be printed. And this was the carpet. So the carpets triggered augmented sculptures that also became, because they were on the same level as where you stand. There's also something about, even though they're so low res, they are like they're on the same ground. So you really read them as they are in your world, which is quite different. So this was the giveaways that also triggered bat wings, ponies, and also when you wear the hat, you're the son of the universe, which feels good. So this toured up north, and it was, I think, for 1 year even, but it was quite. And then I was invited to do by a collection that is a great collection. There was a very, very rich person that bought art last century, and then he became very, very poor. So the state of Sweden bought his collection for like 1 crown or something. It's the biggest collection of like Munch outside of Norway, and it has fantastic work. And they asked me to do something for an exhibition in the park outside their museum. So I was looking at the collection and thinking a lot about all these digital collections and all these images, like what are they there for? We can look at them, but could we, like, how are we supposed to use them? And what do they want us to do with them? So then I used them to make like a screen for the park. And there's a lot of different artists, Swedish artists, that I maybe don't love so much, but it was very fun to incorporate them in this, to use them again as a kind of draping, as a fabric, as a digital sculpture, but also making it very flat again. So this is like how it was. These are the different images that trigger fire and the swans and these kind of park-like things. So the last installation that I made of this was in the. I was asked by they wanted to buy one of the carpets in the Stockholm School of Economics. They have like a lot of art in their collection, and they say that they use it for the students, and I think that they do, but they also enjoy to have the art. So they wanted to buy a carpet, but I thought that's too boring, and I asked them if we couldn't do a project. So then they had a boardroom that looks like this, So it's portraits of men of a certain age and a certain color, and they are all the students that start every year, they go in to meet the headmaster and to be greeted. So if you are a young woman or a person of color or something like this, you don't exactly recognize yourself in these images. But I then asked if I couldn't do more kind of Hogwarts reading of them, so that the smartphone became a scanner, and you scan these projects to add information in this way. So when you look at them through the app, they appear as there's other things. So, for example, one portrait is a collection of other female entrepreneurs, and it was just about when Hillary Clinton was almost elected. So in one portrait, you trigger a model of Hillary Clinton that is standing, blocking the view to the portrait, and just standing and humming like hum 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 hum. So this was, and I think that in this whole project, I tried to really keep a very, how do you say, a very humoristic, very light position. And I want it not only because I want children to look at it, but I think that when I feel playful, or when there's some kind of silliness, I can also more come to seriousness through it. And if it's too, I don't know, I want people to own it. It's like, when you don't feel afraid of it, or you don't feel that it's like above you or something like this. And this is also, here I also did, this was a very expensive Persian carpet in the same boardroom. So here I wanted to add spinning wheel and a sheep to think about the resources that come. So this also triggers, and that's also this is an air vent that you see, I think you see it in this image, yeah. You see up to the left. So this air vent triggers gold money that just comes out from thin air, which is appropriate in this school, where it's a very if you go to this school, you will probably become very successful. So these were the different installations that I made of this konsekvensanalys, and I think that for me that was all of these are very connected to thinking about the everyday. And for me, the everyday is also the textile language that we speak, the way that we know so much about textiles. Like when I look at your jumper, I know what it feels like. I know how it will age. I know everything, almost like how it feels. I don't need to touch it. I don't need to do anything. So to use textiles in a way that is not maybe something that you touch and you just look at it, that's something that is for me an interesting way of using them, or to try to have them in the exhibition here. That it's not necessarily that you have to interact with them, but you all, even nudists, as I always say, have very intimate knowledge about textiles. So there's something about using them in the exhibition here at Garage. Let me go back to I wanted to talk a little bit more about this. So romantic noise coming in. But does it feel clear to you? Do you have any questions? Maybe you want to start to interact with me a little bit.
У кого-то есть вопросы, мы передадим микрофон.
Then I could. Yes.
My name is Ksenia. And I also do art, which includes augmented reality. And for me, what matters is the moment when any digital object leaves a digital trace. And what matters for me is the statistics. Do you keep any statistical data on how people use your objects, how people interact with your objects?
Thank you for your question. I have how many people download, and I have this kind of information. And I actually am maybe a little bit the opposite. I was asked by an organization to give away this data. And I think a lot of the times in Sweden, at least, when it comes to exhibitions and how people are funded, it's like how many people have seen the exhibition, and that's when you get the funding. So this information I did not give away in any way. And for me, it's maybe not so much about that, but I find it very interesting. And can I ask you about it? How you mean? Can I like how do you mean? Like when it kind of when the moment happens, or how they use it? Can you talk? Can you? Yeah, is it possible?
First of all, well, I study at the MA on the history of arts, and my graduation paper is related to how augmented reality can be used in museums. And the first thing I look at is how many visitors enter the museum. I know that it's logical that, for example, at the weekends there are more visitors. So that's the statistics I also keep, how many people visit museums, and when we have the highest attendance, for example, on the weekend or in the evenings, right? So I use it also, I see it in my statistics on how many people use the augmented reality app. What else can I see from the statistics? I can also track what object the visitors liked most, because they interacted with it for the longest time. I arrived to your seminar from Vladivostok, and I interact with the Primorsk painting gallery, and I implemented the augmented reality into my work with the local artists in the Far East of Russia. And using the statistics of augmented reality, I can see which paintings are the most interesting ones for the audience. For example, I can see that one of the paintings has more views and other paintings have fewer views. So I understand that this painter is more likable in a way for the audience. So this is, for example, the kind of research that I do.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think it's something that sometimes when I work with students, they think that when they have an exhibition, they will get reactions from people. You know, the people will be like, hee, ha, you know, have all this like interface, and we don't, because I can look at something and like I can look like this, and I really love it. I think it's so good. You know, it doesn't show in your face. So I understand what you mean. I think that in the first installation when I made this in 2015. I actually had that when you took a photo, it was sent straight to Facebook, I think. It was like in the early days. So in a way you could see anything that anyone interacted with, that they wanted to take a photo of, or that they wanted to send. So in this way, I think that's the only statistics that maybe I have, that I see. I'm more interested in maybe how they do it like this. But I haven't thought about that statistics like that. I think the downloading is, of course, quite interesting, because you can see maybe more things that are like, should it be more information, or how should you, because I always, like, for example, the pieces in Garage Museum, I really want to make them so that they can be without augmented reality. It's like an art piece that will work even if you don't use the app. So the app in this piece is very much the added bonus, and it's more like the enhanced, if you want to. It's a little bit like you have always been able to do with art. You have always been able to photograph it or to play with it in some way. But so I'm more interested in that. But I see what you mean about like popularity. But do you think that this would change the way that you feel in your work with like what is most popular? How would you use that information?
I just started thinking, I think it's all about your goals, your tasks. One of my educations is economy. That's why I love numbers. That's why I take a look at the numbers, always. And you are coming from a totally different background, I believe. And I think that's why we have different perspectives. Also, I work in IT, so that's why am also interested in numbers and figures in the results, the result of my digital work. And I think you are more, as for the wow effect, it also matters to me, but I've been working with the digital technologies for quite a while. That's why I take this reaction in a very calm manner, like, okay, wow effect is good, but now let's look at the numbers. Numbers are good for me. I always look at the numbers.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think that I'm not so interested in the wow, maybe more like really the augmentation of the everyday, like the kind of that we maybe move in a way or interact with our objects around us in a way that changes our view of them. Maybe not so radically, but something changes in our relationship of like seeing and using the body and using the phone, and this kind of triangular relationship interests me. But I see what I mean. If I had an institution or if I had a collection that I would work with more permanently, then you start to be interested in numbers in a different way. And also maybe in the future you can get more data of how not only how much, but maybe of the other qualities of the interaction. Interesting. Thank you very much.
Спасибо. Комментарии.
Any comments or questions?
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to show something else?
Yes, but I would actually like. Can I? Is it very strange to propose to? Yeah, I will show a little bit. Okay. Oh, wow, how nice. So I've been also looking at like how strange to get into your Instagram, but it's okay. But also like the how the work has been in the when I have it in the studio. So for example, that was the force from the first installation, and how this. I think for me very much the relationship between not only that it is a wolf in the room, but that there is a carpet with a stupid print on that has a wolf on it that I activate with my phone. So this is very much like the way that what triggers me to keep on using this technology is not so much just the augmented things, but the relationship to the physical objects. And when I look at, for example, like this. This is the way, like I see, because when this is how this app works for me. Like when I play with it, this is how I think about it. This is the fabric in my studio, and it's more like to make a like these patterns are mapped then on the heart, on the bear, on the everything. So it's more like to make a reverb of patterns or to create an kind of insane perch world, but to make a world with the patterns rather than to make a kind of that the augmented is I don't know how to say, that is free from the world, not just in the space, but that it's in relationship, and to create this kind of connections between the digital and the physical is something that I'm very interested in, and to also translate the digital into the physical somehow. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think, and this is like the. Yeah, here you see the Ivanovo trip. So this was the pattern that I talked about, People of the World Unite. So you see it downstairs in the prints more, and you have to imagine that the flower is about this big. So it's really like a. I still keep on thinking about this pattern and about the designer that made it, and why the completely hidden nature of it. I'm not sure about why this is like this.
There could be one link to that.
Yeah. Yes.
Да, можно здесь, если отвечать на вопрос.
Yeah, if I answer...
I thought I knew Russian.
Простите, я подумала, что уже выучила русский.
Если задумываться,
So if we think even about these flowers, that even such a small flower calls the people to unite from all the countries. We can also remember what Trotsky said, that the revolution has to take part on the molecular level. And even such a small thing is a very important piece, even before the 20s, when the revolutionary enthusiasm caught all over the country, and not only this country, but parts of the other world. And I think it's logical that you can see it even in such small details, such small things. I just wanted to make those comments, like where it's born from, where this idea comes from.
There's an interesting, thank you very much for this. There's an interesting, oh no, yeah, now I have to, sorry, now I'm all over the place. So that's also the Trotsky cutout from this. Oh, yes, oh yeah, now it's, yeah. So, but it was also, so this is, so here they removed him. But now they also told me in the archive that I've actually found like a family has kept Trotsky in an envelope, but not the whole picture, but like pulled out in threads. So it's very, the molecular vision of Trotsky has been realized in an envelope with the threads. So I think that's very much also like how you, because there's so many of the Trotsky cut out in this way, and you understand why, and I did too, but I think that to keep it in a way that you would have to weave it again to be able to, and also you can't write Trotsky on top of it, so it has been like passed on to family members or to someone like this to understand where it's coming from. I thought that was a very beautiful moment, but it's also like a lot of the different prints, like for example, there was many, like this print is called 5-year plan in 4 years. And so all the prints, they have names that also really pull you into history and to have to understand what is going on. And for me, that was also maybe not something that I wanted to headline in the piece, but something that kept my interest in going into it, and also still am. So for me, I see it as a beginning of working with these patterns, and also now I'm looking a lot at the Swedish patterns of the same era and thinking a lot about Swedish politics that of course also is of a socialist nature, but not as maybe thoroughly didn't really take on in the same way, but it still has very many similarities. And to see how the propaganda was in my own culture also, which was maybe not as visible, maybe due to the artist not working in the same way, but still it's there, embedded in it. So I definitely think that, and there's more of this in the one that is, no, that's not it. Yeah, I think that also that in this one where it's like there's a factory and people coming out from it was of course my first thought. But then you realize, no, of course it's a kind of promoting to be happy to go to the factory. So it's the whistle that makes you want to go to the factory, and all these very small details in the prints for me also, it's a way of, even though I can read about it, it's also a way of just using the print. I've been going into thinking a lot about leopard print in my teaching, and looking at how leopard print has been very popularized in the 30s and in the 90s, and how it's also been in the idea of how Africa is being perceived as something wild and something very different. And also how these kind of, there's secrets in all prints and in all patterns that have affected different and been a dialogue between different cultures. And patterns are never innocent. They always carry some kind of meaning, and they also contaminate other patterns. And I think to try to see the whole world, and it was also in the archive, they also have a lot of where you could see that these were prints that were made for the Chinese market, for example. You could see that they were different, so they had a lot of different styles, and also of course different levels of abstraction and realism depending on when in history it was. So it's definitely in this way. Yeah.
Еще вопрос у кого-нибудь?
I'm not really sure what I want to talk about now. I got so much into now thinking about Trotsky and the molecular. But yeah. But I think it's an interesting thing. So is it possible to go and see the work from here? Is that a strange request to go together to look at the work in situ? Is it a little bit crazy? Okay, I see. But it's nicer to see the actual work and talk about it when you look at it. But what I can more say about this, like the different relationship between the augmented reality and the patterns in the overall, they were of course also created in dialogue with both the patterns, but also my ideas of what it means to constantly work and to constantly play. And I think that for me, maybe I'm still left in these different ideas about not only the mind working and the mind being in leisure, but also how the body is being in leisure and working, and how these different parts of us need to be activated into be able to creating something new with this new technology. So I think there will be people, as this question was before, I think there will be people that will use this technology in really advanced ways, and that will probably be something that we haven't seen before. But at the moment, I think I don't think that there will be a physical object in the future, the mobile phone. I don't think it will be something we touch. I think it will be voice activated probably. So then we will lose even more touch, I think. So, but at the moment, I think that they kind of to have this, like, you know how you touch, when they have these fabrics, if you're a person that conserves fabrics, then there's always like right about here, there's a fat thing. And that's called the lady circle, translated when you talk to Swedish conservatives. And it's like because women, they say, or always have to touch it and look at the back of it. So it's always like to touch and to look at the back of it. So then you get this fat thing here. And then you have your phones, and then you always have, or at least I have constantly these kind of fat things from touching it, or how these very clean surfaces also become very contaminated with our bodily actions, and that's the kind of, I think that's the kind of poetry as well, not only what's on the screen, but also how these carriers of information interact with the body in different ways. Maybe I go back to talking more about the latest thing. These two, all of the different objects in these different installations have been shown also in more formal art contexts. But the last ones from the boardroom are also part of an exhibition in Tensta Museum that is a collaboration with the Tensta shopping center. So they are also included in the shopping center, and they have so both this air vent with the constant flow of money is something that's included in a shop for, gambling. So in the gambling shop, you can also have this experience of having constant flow of cash, which is what you want in the end. And also the sheep is, I wonder if you can get very big money if you see it this big. You see it next time. Oh, it's actually flying up. So this is the way that it will constantly give you cash. And also the sheep is also installed in a shop that sells wool and sells clothes made of wool and these different things, with a Persian woman working in it. So it's also interesting to just integrate, to just keep on using it's like how you use fabric. You take a top that you liked and you sew it to a pillow, and then you change it to something else, and you can always like reuse it and use it in different ways. So this is and then I've just done a proposal that I was asked by, I think that's with working with this Stockholm School of Economics, which I think is very interesting. It's also that I've been asked to there's people that come and see this, and of course also people that are on the board and other people like that, and they just want to, I also have a collection of paintings that I want them to talk and do different things. So I was asked by someone like this, and I went to the house and I saw these paintings and I saw the room, and it's an old shipping company in Sweden that's been dealing a lot with trade of different kinds. So, but my proposal now is that I will make because this is a company that also is talking a lot about that they care about the environment, and they want to work with sustainability, and they want to work with these kind of things, and they also ship things all over the world. So when I was there, and there's also been like discussions on how the politics in Sweden and what different parties can be supported by these people. And there's also right-wing parties that have a very bad views on immigration and these questions that can also they not support, but they don't want to not talk to these parties. So then my proposal is to fill the room with water, so that it's like not of overflow, but that you stand in the sea, so that it's just like the whole room is just kind of just the sea that you stand in. So we'll see if this proposal will be good. But I think it would really add to the story of that house and of the kind of collection and of these different things. But it's, as you say, it's like the wow factor, but it can also be something that can be like a contemporary conversation piece in many ways, I think. Okay, I think that I would like to end there, if that's okay. I would like to go down to see the piece, but maybe if I sneak out and then you go and see the piece together.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.